There is a man whose job is to measure how far Japan's busiest international gateway sank last year. He has never once written down 0. This is Kansai International Airport, built 4 kilometers out in Osaka Bay, on an island that did not exist until engineers made one. It cost somewhere north of $20 billion. It has been open since 1994. And in the 3.5 decades since the first rock was dropped into the water, the ground it stands on has gone down by more than 12 meters. Not 12 centimeters. 12 meters. Roughly the height of a 4-story building. The airport still works. Planes land on it every day. The reason that is true is a lot stranger than the sinking itself. Start with why anyone would build here at all. By the 1960s, Osaka had a problem shared by most large Japanese cities. Itami, its existing airport, sat surrounded by dense housing. Residents sued over the noise. Night flights were restricted. There was no room to expand in any direction without demolishing neighborhoods, and land in urban Japan is among the most expensive on Earth. The obvious solution was to move the airport somewhere nobody lived. In Osaka, the only place that qualified was the sea. So the plan became an artificial island, far enough offshore that a 24-hour airport would not wake anyone, close enough to connect by a road and rail bridge. On paper, elegant. In practice, it meant building a runway on a seabed nobody would voluntarily build anything on. The bay floor at the chosen site sat under about 18 meters of water. Beneath that was roughly 20 meters of soft alluvial clay, the consistency of thick pudding. And beneath that, going down hundreds of meters, layer after layer of older Pleistocene clay that everyone had assumed was stable. Anything you place on clay like this squeezes water out of it. The clay compresses. The thing on top goes down. Engineers call this consolidation, and it is not a defect. It is physics doing exactly what it always does. The only question on a project like this is how much and how fast, and whether you can stay ahead of it. The team's answer was to drive roughly 1.2 million vertical sand drains into the soft upper clay before loading it. The drains give the trapped water a fast route out, which forces most of the settlement to happen early, during construction, rather than slowly for the next century under a finished terminal. Then they piled on the fill. Something in the order of 180 million cubic meters of earth and rock, quarried from hills on the mainland and barged out, held in place by a seawall around the perimeter. The soft layer behaved. It compressed hard and early, more or less on schedule. That part of the engineering worked. What did not behave was the deep clay underneath it. And this is where the story turns. If the scale of this is getting to you, hit subscribe. We take apart a new colossus every week. Those deeper Pleistocene layers had been treated as effectively rigid, a floor to build the calculation on. They were not. Under the weight of a new island, they began compressing too, slowly and unevenly, on a time scale measured in decades rather than months. The prediction had been settlement of around 5.5 to 6 meters. By the time the airport opened in 1994, the island had already passed 8. That is the number that matters, and it is worth being precise about what it means. The engineers were not wrong about the mechanism. They were wrong about the depth of it. The ground kept giving underneath the part of the ground they had accounted for. Which brings us to the thing that keeps the airport alive. When Renzo Piano's terminal was designed, a building 1.7 kilometers long, the longest airport terminal in the world, the team did something unusual. They assumed the sinking would continue and would not be even. So instead of setting the building on fixed foundations, they mounted it on roughly 900 columns and put adjustable jacks at the top of each one. When a section of the island drops relative to its neighbors, crews go underneath, take the load on hydraulic jacks, and slide iron plates into the gap to shim the column back to level. Then they lower it again. It is done at night, section by section, and it has been going on continuously for 30 years. The airport is not resting on the island. It is riding it. There is no other major terminal on Earth that is leveled by hand as a routine maintenance item. It is treated in the operating budget the way another airport treats resurfacing a taxiway, a recurring cost with a line item and a crew. Then there is the second island. In 2007, Kansai opened a second runway on a new artificial island beside the first, built with the deeper clay problem now fully understood. It was engineered with the real settlement behavior designed in from the start, rather than discovered afterwards. It is also sinking. Slower, more predictably, within the numbers this time. But the direction of travel is the same, because the physics was never optional. And here is the part that does not appear in the promotional material. An island that sinks does not just get lower relative to the terminal. It gets lower relative to the sea. On the 4th of September 2018, Typhoon Jebi came across the Kansai region, one of the most powerful storms to strike Japan in decades. The storm surge pushed water over the seawall and onto the airport. The runway flooded. Water got into the basement, taking out electrical equipment. Then a tanker at anchor broke free and drifted into the bridge that carries road and rail to the mainland, damaging it badly enough to cut the connection. Around 3,000 people were stranded overnight on an artificial island in a typhoon, with the only road out struck by a ship. The airport was substantially out of service for days. Afterwards, the seawall was raised and hardened, and drainage and electrical systems were moved or protected. That work was necessary and it was done. But the underlying arithmetic did not change. The defenses are on the same ground that is going down, and the sea is not going down with them. So the real engineering question at Kansai was never whether to stop the sinking. Nobody can stop it. The question was whether the rate of settlement could be brought below the rate at which the operator can keep raising, shimming, and reinforcing. So far, the answer has been yes. Settlement was fastest in the early years and has slowed substantially, as consolidation always does. The jacking crews are ahead of it. The seawall has been raised. The airport handles tens of millions of passengers a year and is, by most operational measures, an extremely good airport. But the honest way to describe Kansai is not as a finished structure. It is a managed condition. It works because a certain number of people keep showing up to measure it and correct it, and it will continue to work exactly as long as that continues. That is the part nobody mentions when this place is used as a symbol of what engineering can do. The airport is not proof that the sea can be beaten. It is proof that it can be paid, in installments, forever. And Kansai is not alone in that. All over the world there are airports, ports, and whole districts built on reclaimed ground, on soft coastal sediment, quietly settling by a few millimeters a year, while the water beside them is measured going the other way. Most of them do not have 900 jacks and a crew that shows up at night. Kansai has the advantage of knowing exactly what it is standing on. The uncomfortable question is, how many places do not?